Welcome back to The Burn. I am Ryan Van Dever, and we are presented to you by Hot Zone Sports. The information that you need to know, built with you in mind, for the people, by the people, and with the people. Join the Hot Zone Sports community today. Remember, our show is wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. So if you could rate and review us, we would really appreciate that. If you're watching on YouTube, first off, congratulations. You found the best sports page on YouTube. Secondly, subscribe to the show and then hit that notification button so you'll always know when our content drops. Make sure you like the videos, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And wherever you like to social media, we are there. You can find us at Hot Zone Sports. Just look for the logo. On today's episode, we are going to be going over the college football playoff rankings and laying out all sorts of scenarios. What could cause all this chaos? We're going to deep dive into all of that. We're also going to be talking about the best games of the weekend and what you should keep your eye out for. We're going to be diving into Army, Notre Dame. A big matchup of the weekend against number 6 Notre Dame against number 19 Army. Basically, all the chips are on the table in this game. If Notre Dame loses, they're out. If Army loses, they're out. If one or the other loses, they continue to be in the playoff. Well, Army will be moving forward to reaching the playoff, and Notre Dame would definitely still be in the playoffs, sitting at number 6. We are also going to go over the Indiana-Ohio State monster, highly anticipated top 5 matchup. Along with, you may not think it's very important, but Ole Miss, Florida. If Ole Miss wants to continue those playoff hopes and keep them alive, they are going to have to beat Florida. But what is DJ Lagway going to have to say about that? BYU, Arizona State, that Big 12 game of the week. We will take a little bit of a dive in that one as well. There are some ramifications in that game, some big implications. And lastly, we will be going over Kansas and Colorado. Can the 4-6 Kansas Jayhawks take down the surging Colorado Buffaloes? This we will discuss. So let's get right in it. Why not? Let's start into the college football playoff rankings. They came out Tuesday night. And I was going to do this podcast last night, but I just wasn't feeling well. And you deserve the best. The college football committee is getting pretty ridiculous at this point. It is blatantly obvious that they don't believe the strength of record is anything to be looked at. Here's an example. Georgia. Yep. We're starting with the Bulldogs. If any team has the biggest gripe in the newest college football rankings, it's them. And no, I am not Paul Feinbaum. Let me explain. The best Texas, they beat Texas at Texas. They beat Alabama at Alabama. They lost at Ole Miss, and then they beat number 7 Tennessee at home. Indiana has not played a ranked team. This has been talked about ad nauseum. They get a top-ranked team this weekend. Penn State, they lost to Ohio State. Granted, by a touchdown. But you can't tell me that Miami, they lost to Georgia Tech. Penn State and Indiana are better than Georgia. There's no way the committee believes in something this blasphemous. Strength of record, your record, relative to the teams that you have played. Yes, this is one metric that the committee should be going off of. Going off of strength of record, Oregon is sitting at number 1. Number 2, Georgia. But yet, somehow, the committee has planted them at number 10. That's right, number 10. Playing on the road to Texas, Ole Miss, and Tennessee is going to have a toll on your team. It's not like the schedule when you're Indiana and you're playing Charlotte, Florida International, and UCLA. These comparisons are not apples to apples. And historically, the College Football Committee has had direct correlation with a deciding factor of strength of record. So one way to explain Georgia being so low is the eye test. Even though they beat number 3 Texas handily, which makes even less sense to me as to how they're so low. Maybe they value how Indiana has been beating the living daylights out of teams even when said teams aren't in the top 25. Yes, currently Georgia is in the playoff. I know. But they don't have a route to get any higher than they are. They have UMass and Georgia Tech left on their schedule. Not exactly two high-quality opponents. I know. Georgia Tech beat Miami. It's a shame. So the Bulldogs could start off the playoff at a team like Indiana, at Penn State, in a whiteout. Very cold weather climates. Yes, Indiana is undefeated, but they haven't played anyone ranked in the top 25 this season. You're going to be hearing that a lot. Now, that's about to change, and if they beat Ohio State, then I will eat some crow. But the way they struggled against Michigan didn't prove anything to me. It didn't prove that they aren't going to struggle mightily against number 2 Ohio State Buckeyes. I mean, there's a reason that the line is minus 13.5 for Ohio State. But I guarantee that the College Football Playoff Committee is going to be looking at this game and the differential of points in this game. If Indiana loses, they need to keep it somewhat close because not playing a top 25 team all year and then getting the opportunity to play a top 2 team in Ohio State and losing by 20 points is not going to look good. But on the other side, it is number 2 Ohio State, and losing to them would be considered a good loss. I know nobody wants to hear that, but those are the facts. Going off of strength of schedule, Indiana is ranked 106th in the country. I may be on the small end of the spectrum here in regards how I feel about Indiana, but I feel that if it's even a semi-competitive game, say they lose by 10 points, I think they're going to find their way into the college football playoff. Call me crazy, but I think the committee is going to value the Hoosiers beating the bloody hell out of teams. Example, 47-10, Michigan State, 56-7, Nebraska. They are going to value that more than their strength of record or RPI. But should they get in? I come from the side, call it old school, all you want, that if you lose a high-profile game and you don't have another leg to stand on, i.e., another legitimate big-time win, then you shouldn't get in. A lot like Texas. If they lose to A&M, I'm part of the same belief that they shouldn't be in. No, I'm not hating on these teams. It's just pure logic. This makes the most damn sense in the world to me. But if Indiana keeps it somewhat competitive, I think the committee will open that door for them to get into the college football playoff. The Big Ten is basically overvalued for their losses, right? Penn State losing to Ohio State by 7. Yes, it was a close loss, but they just beat Wisconsin, and people are saying that's a good win. Indiana, we will talk more about them after the big noon kickoff game. that is when we're going to find out truly what type of team they are. So until then, going to back off on the Hoosiers. Penn State, their best non-conference win was against West Virginia. They had a close loss to Ohio State. I mean, they did beat USC in overtime, and that win isn't exactly looking like the greatest right now. Not exactly a top team there. But quickly, not going to touch on this a lot. Miami should not be at number 8. No way, no how. They almost lost to Cal. Not great. Almost lost to Duke. Again, not great. And they lost to Georgia Tech. They are at number 8. Come on, College Football Committee. Miami's defense is not even close to being impressive. Their offense is the same thing. They got knocked around a few weeks ago by Georgia Tech. Then there's Texas. There are reasons why they're ranked so high. Brand viability. The committee expects them to do good. And the eye test. If they go to College Station here in a couple weeks and lose, there is a real possibility that the Longhorns are left out of the playoff. Yes, they went to the defending national championships house, the big house, and beat them. But that win is looking more and more like a meh win. But a loss to A&M would be costly. Very costly, especially when you don't have any top 25 wins. You had a chance against Georgia, but playing at home against a great team, I won't say elite here, because I haven't seen them be elite in any week thus far this season. But let's just say, for argument's sake, you put another name in front of that Texas name, and you look at their schedule. Are you getting in with no top 25 wins? You beat Vandy. Okay. You beat Florida. Well, there isn't an impressive win on Texas's resume if they fail to lose both of their most important games, Texas A&M and Georgia, and they've already lost one of those. You played Florida without Lagway, which kind of hot take here. That's a top 25 team with Lagway in there. Once again, like Michigan, it's not your fault he didn't play. But the committee could punish you or not reward you for these wins as much for things such as these. But without the Texas name in front of that schedule, I'm not sure it stacks up. Of course, they would be judged against the rest of the field. If they beat A&M, they pass that eye test. And they're probably headed to the SEC championship game in Atlanta and would probably be favored. We got to touch on Notre Dame, guys. I know. There's not a lot of Notre Dame fans, but we're going to do it anyway because it is a topic of discussion that needs to be touched on. Notre Dame hasn't exactly been elite this year, okay? Losing to Northern Illinois, an average team, that's at best. They have been talked about ad nauseum, but the fact remains, yes, they've rattled off 8 straight wins and might eventually be 9 after the Army game this weekend. Don't worry, we're going to talk about that Army game. But they don't have to run through conference games like the SEC or the Big Ten for that matter, because they are independent. And I think they love it that way. Because guess what? You do not have a conference championship game. But their best win has been against Texas A&M in the first game of the season. Yeah, they went to College Station, but that's basically their staple win of the year. Their second best win is against Louisville, who are now sitting at 6-4 as of today. So you can say that's an average win at this point. If they lose to Army this weekend, it's done. It's over with. Finito. The 7 Power 4 opponents Notre Dame faced so far has had a combined record of 30-40. You got to credit the Irish for blowing out mediocre and bad opponents. The Irish are ranked ahead of teams like Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia when their strength of schedule trails every single SEC team in playoff contention. If the playoff were to start today, Notre Dame would be seeded at number 8 and would host the number 9 seed. But at least one team ranked ahead of it is guaranteed to lose because Ohio State and Indiana, they will play each other. Other teams ranked ahead of the Irish might lose in the conference championship game. A risk Notre Dame isn't going to have to take as an independent. But playoff selection day, the Irish could climb all the way up to number 5 and host the playoffs' worst team while owning the most embarrassing loss of any team in the field and pinning its resume to its helmets. That's quite a prize, considering a number 5 seed is literally the best seed Notre Dame is eligible to receive. The top 4 seeds are reserved for conference champions. But let's pause to say this could sort itself out on the field. The Irish have games remaining against undefeated Army this weekend and at Southern California, 2 of their toughest tests. Lose one, we're not going to be debating whether Notre Dame should be a first-round host because the Irish won't be in the playoff at all. An Irish loss would unlock a playoff spot for Tennessee, but I do have a problem with the college football playoff. If you tell me that the number 5 seed gets the G5 team and gets the Big 12 champ, I'm going to lose my mind, okay? We are just a few small weeks away from Selection Sunday, and the picture is starting to get more clear. Slowly. The projected number 5 seed, Ohio State Buckeyes, would host BYU, and assuming that they get past the Cougs, they would host Boise State. Oregon, on the other hand, would await the winner of Alabama Notre Dame. In all likelihood, this isn't how everything is going to play out. But with the Big Ten and SEC championships, there is a chance where the loser of the title game drops to the number 5 seed. What's your consolation prize, you ask? The Big 12 champion and then Boise State. Just imagine, you're in the SEC and you've been battling all year, and assuming Boise State wins out and they get a first-round bye, and then while your SEC/Big Ten school plays in the first round because why? Boise State won their conference, and they have the best record. But can we just sit back and relax and enjoy everything that is going on here with college football? This is the first season where there is a 12-team playoff, and this is just beyond words. Right? A few years ago, the 4-team playoff, when it started, I thought it was just a really bad concept, right? I didn't quite understand how it was going to be any different than the BCS because it had the same metrics, the same parameters, and the same teams played in the championship year after year. So I didn't quite get it. So me personally, I didn't think this 12-team playoff, I don't think it's a perfect model by any means. There are some things that could be changed. There are some kinks, some wrinkles that need to be ironed out. It's not a perfect model, but I personally think that a 16-team playoff would be too much, right? But a 14-team playoff would be just right. We're 2 weeks away from Selection Sunday, and we're just getting more and more games that have playoff implications. You have Army going up against Notre Dame. You have Clemson, who has to win out. You have Texas A&M going up against Texas next week. You have Iowa State. You have BYU versus Arizona State this weekend. You have Kansas against Colorado this weekend. Colorado's on the freaking ropes. Can Kansas take them down? Indiana versus Ohio State. And Tennessee needs to continue to win out if they have a chance to make it into the college football playoff. There's just so much parity in college football right now. It is absolutely amazing. This is what the NCAA thought was going to happen when they drummed up this idea and they designed this format. And it is working to perfection. I have noticed on many of my sports pages and on my YouTube that the college football fan bases of all of these prominent teams have grown. And it is going to continue to grow, in all honesty. And there's going to be more eyes on all of these games because now your team could be a bubble team and you're going to be watching to see if this team loses so that your team can get into the playoff. It is absolutely wild. But I am sure everybody has noticed with the transfer portal and the NIL that there has been tons of parity, and it's going to continue because no longer is it going to be every 5-star blue chip prospect is going to Georgia, going to Alabama. The talent is going to disperse out, and there's going to be a lot more evenly matched up games. And if you are not excited for that, I do not know what to tell you. Because just thinking about it brings excitement into every single bone of my body. There is absolutely a full slate of games this weekend, and a lot of them have college football playoff implications. So without further ado, let's jump into the most important game of the weekend. Not really. Army versus Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman is understanding the pressure. Number 6, Notre Dame, is going to be facing off against number 19, Army. Army is undefeated. This game is going to be played in Yankee Stadium. Yes, expect those crazy-ass uniforms to come out. Now, having won all of the 11 previous Shamrock Series games, including the past 3 against ranked competition, the Irish are 2 touchdown favorites. Yes, and they're just 2 wins away from pissing the entire college football world off by getting into the 12-team college football playoff. Likely hosting at Notre Dame Stadium next month. Notre Dame's passing game has been a work in progress all season long, but there have been little flickers of sustained success the past few weeks as Riley Leonard seems to be growing into offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock's playbook. All right. For example, all 6 of Notre Dame's top receivers caught passes against Virginia, a first since they played Texas A&M. Yep, it's been that bad. That's on top of 2 tight ends and 2 running backs. Any idea the Irish would have a true go-to receiver has felt like wishful thinking since the beginning of the year. But Notre Dame now looks like it has an offense where any target can produce, depending on the coverage, of course, and depending on the quarterback seeing the opportunity. After Bo Collins looked like a potential wide receiver 1 at Texas A&M, everyone else has flashed at one point or another since. Last week, that was Jaden Harrison, the third of 3 grad transfers at wide receiver and an addition who has felt more like a special teams threat than a true wideout when he signed. Instead, Harrison posted 3 catches for 41 yards and a touchdown against Virginia. I know, there's pushback, but it's Virginia. The fact remains. It doesn't include his long touchdown of the game, though, that was called back by a penalty. Yep, Army's quarterback, though. is unlike anything Notre Dame has faced this season, including Navy's Blake Horvath last month. Both the run, the option, but that doesn't mean they run the option the same way. In Army's 14-3 win over North Texas 2 weeks ago, Daly ran 36 times for 153 yards and both touchdowns. It was a spike in job share for Daly, although he still averaging nearly 23 rushing attempts per game. That means Notre Dame should have plenty of chances to hit the 6-foot, 221-pound quarterback. The Irish know they need to take advantage. The Irish got to wrap up, got to put helmets on them. An advantage to this game is the fact that Notre Dame has already played and defeated an option run team. So that should make Notre Dame fans a little bit happier. But you can't underestimate that the Irish have to set the edge on defense. That is vital. Daly won't throw it nearly as much as Horvath did, and Army seems more likely to stick to its plan even if it falls behind early. That could possibly be the downfall of the Golden Knights, and the college football playoff could entirely drop out of their hands. Army leads the nation in rushing yards per game, with 334.9 yards per game, more than 70 yards per game ahead of second place UCF. When Army fell behind by a field goal during the first quarter at North Texas, it marked the first time that the Black Knights had trailed all season. That deficit lasted a little bit less than 6 minutes. That's how dominant Army has been all season long. Turnovers. Army has just lost 2 fumbles all season long, and it tops nationally with the fewest giveaways, with 3 all season long. Some teams have 3 a game, but Notre Dame, they hold on to the number 1 spot in the country with 25 takeaways, and they have had 5 fumble recoveries and an interception in the big win against Navy, which plays a similar brand of football to Army. You have to own the clock in this game. You have to control the clock. Army leads the country in rushing production, as we said earlier. It is second in the FBS in third down conversion success and in time of possession, making any opposing game plan for Notre Dame only too obvious. You got to keep the West Point offense off the field with their own rushing attack, which means you're going to have a rushing attack of your own. And you can't just be throwing it all over the yard, which, if you have watched any of their games, this is what they do. They control the clock. Irish quarterback Riley Leonard leads the team with 13 rushing touchdowns. You got running back Jeremiah Love, who has scored at least once in all 10 games while covering at 720 yards. And Jadarian Price, he leads the roster with 7.3 yards per carry. Notre Dame's expert pass defense won't be pressured by the Black Knights' limited vertical attack. And the Irish should have a marked size advantage when stacking bodies on both sides of the scrimmage. That's in addition to an athleticism edge boasting perimeter defenders who can close down any routes to the outside of the formation and limit Army to moderate gains. I expect Notre Dame to win this game. I don't think it's going to be a 1-score game. I believe that it's going to ultimately come down to a 2-score game. I got the Irish winning by 2 touchdowns. Sorry, Army. I served. It's just not going to be your game. Indiana, Ohio State. Boy, oh boy, this is a highly anticipated top 5 matchup between the Indiana Hoosiers and the Ohio State Buckeyes, which is expected to be one of the day's biggest games, if not the biggest game of the day. And it could have a significant impact on the Big Ten conference standings. But saying that, it's the nation's number 1 scoring defense against the number 2 scoring offense. Ohio State has allowed only 10.3 points per game this season. Their defense is not talked about enough, which is the best mark in the nation. Indiana is scoring 43.9 points per game, which trails only Miami's 45 points per game. What's crazier is that Ohio State is allowing only 7.3 points per game at home. While you may believe Indiana's offense isn't as good away from home, the numbers disagree. And I know the teams they played. We have discussed this ad nauseum throughout the season. But Indiana's average of 43.9 points per game drops to just 43.3 on the road. So this is a team that travels well with their offense. This is Ohio State's third game against a top 5 team this year. It's the most times it's happened in a single season for the Buckeyes, who have seen mixed results in their first 2 contests. The first game was Ohio State's 32-31 bone-crushing loss at number 3 Oregon. Yep, I'm sure the Buckeyes still remember Will Howard's bonehead mistake. But the second game was the Buckeyes' 20-13 win over number 3 Penn State. This is going to serve as a rubber match of sorts. Indiana has the best points per game margin in the country. We've mentioned that. Indiana scores more than nearly everybody, but they aren't a one-dimensional team. The defense has been just as impressive, which is why the Hoosiers, still having trouble saying that the Hoosiers is a football school, but I will digress. They have a points per game margin of plus 30.1 this year. Ohio State isn't that far behind, though. They are ranked third at 27.5 points per game. These are 2 teams who win a lot and don't play a lot of close games. But I do have concerns for both teams here. Ohio State is banged up on the offensive line, and they lost starting center Seth McLaughlin to a torn Achilles in practice this week. That is a big, big miss. He is a transfer from Alabama, and he has been starting all season long. So it's fair to wonder how well this rushing offense is going to run behind this offensive line. How well are they going to perform against the Hoosiers? Now, at the same time, Indiana's worst offensive performance of the season came in their last game against Michigan. Say all you want. I said on the podcast that Michigan played their second half. It was their best half of the season. So take that for what you will. But whether you win by 1, whether you win by 90, a dub's a dub, guys. Now, Michigan was obviously the best defense that they've faced all year. This Ohio State defense is better than Michigan. So it's fair to wonder how successful the Hoosiers' high-flying offense is going to be. If Ohio State wins out, the Buckeyes will secure a rematch with Oregon in the conference title game. And boy, what a rematch that would be. Now, if Indiana pulls off the upset, it will be the most significant win in program history. And it might throw the playoff race into pure chaos. This is one game you are not going to want to miss, which is why I'm telling you the time, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fox. Watch it. I swear to you, it's going to be a good one. The next game is Ole Miss in Florida. Now, I get it. You may be saying, Ole Miss in Florida? Why would we want to watch this game? What kind of implications are there? The path to the SEC championship is not clear for Ole Miss, but the college football playoff is certainly within their sights. All the Rebels have to do is avoid an upset before December. The Rebels travel to the Swamp, which has lowered expectations and is on the cusp of bowl eligibility, despite dealing with an avalanche of injuries at quarterback and questions about the future of head coach Billy Napier. Say what you want about that. Good night. There is a previous podcast where I go deep into Billy Napier. That sounded weird, but it is a deep dive. You do not want to miss that. Back to the preview. The road here hasn't been without its bumps for Ole Miss, though. They have left no room for error after suffering a second loss in overtime at LSU. Perfection has been a must for the Ole Miss Rebels, who have rebounded with impressive blowout wins and a double-digit victory against a top 10 Georgia to load its playoff resume heading into the final 2 weeks of the season. Good news for the Rebels, though. Ole Miss wide receiver Trey Harris is coming back for a return. At one time, Trey Harris led the nation in receiving, and even though he had missed 3 games with an injury, he still stands at number 5 entering the final 2 weeks of the regular season. It appears he may finally return to the field Saturday at Florida. Harris has been called by Coach Lane Kiffin as the best wide receiver in the land. And with all signs pointing to his return on Saturday, this is going to give the Ole Miss offense another target, another weapon. But even without Harris, Ole Miss has been dynamic on offense this season. On the games that he's missed, the Rebels broke the school record for passing yards in a single game with 562 yards against Arkansas. Yes, it's Arkansas. I know, whatever. It's still a record, and it got broke. So whatever. And Jackson Dart has only thrown 1 interception in his last 3 games. Ole Miss is winning games because of its dominant defensive line. They are frustrating opposing quarterbacks. Just ask Carson Beck. The Rebels lead the nation with 46 sacks. Yeah, 46 sacks. And they have been quite productive during the 3-game winning streak, combining for 22 sacks during that time. They also lead the SEC with 235 quarterback pressures. Just something to keep your mind on if the usually mobile DJ Lagway is limited again with his hamstring injury. While Ole Miss is currently projected to be in the college football playoff field with a number 9 ranking, a 3rd loss on the season is essentially going to yank them out of the field. Now, you pair that with the fact that Florida is seeking its 6th win of the season, along with bowl eligibility. And this SEC matchup is going to have plenty of storylines. Despite DJ Lagway starting for the Gators, the Rebel defense will shut the freshman phenom down, bringing home at least 4 sacks. Jackson Dart is going to throw 2+ touchdowns with Trey Harris and his big return, and he is going to have over 100 yards and a touchdown. I am taking Ole Miss in this game. The Big 12 game of the week is BYU and Arizona State, and yes, we are going to talk about it. Arizona State and BYU both have everything in front of them for the rest of the season. All right. Saturday night, only one of these 2 teams is going to be able to say that. The Sun Devils are absolutely thriving under second-year coach Kenny Dillingham, riding a 3-game win streak, recently beating Kansas State, just completely drubbing them. And they're boasting the program's most dramatic turnaround in nearly 30 years. Meanwhile, BYU is rebounding from its first loss of the season as it still controls its Big 12 fate. Saturday is going to mark the first time the Sun Devils have hosted a November game as a ranked team since 2014. Yeah, you can pretty much say that the Sun Devils are relevant again. They entered the season as a Big 12 underdog. They were predicted to finish dead last in the preseason poll. They have obviously surpassed all expectations. And they have secured an impressive 5-win improvement over last season. But they are on the cusp of doing something special. BYU, they stormed out of the gates this season, going 9-0 before stumbling against Kansas last week, losing 17-13. Now, despite that setback, the Cougars remain well positioned in the Big 12 race and have an opportunity to change the narrative back to a positive one against Arizona State. But let's talk about the stakes. Not the meat and potatoes, the stakes. For BYU, the stakes go beyond the rankings, though. After being picked 13th in the preseason Big 12 poll, it's ridiculous. These preseason polls are a sham. The Cougars, they have defied expectations, aiming to solidify themselves as contenders in their new conference, the Big 12. Their head coach, Kalani Sitake, has completely changed the buzz and the culture with this turnaround season. But with that loss to Kansas last week, what it did is it made BYU fall 8 spots in the college football playoff rankings. BYU still has a path to reach the conference title game and would punch its ticket this weekend with a win over Arizona State and an Iowa State loss to Utah. But Arizona State has been one of the surprise stories of the college football season. The Sun Devils are coming off a victory, a 24-14 victory, and it wasn't even that close, folks, over Kansas State. And they have won 5 of their last 6 games. They are running on all cylinders. Arizona State is currently tied for 3rd place in the league with Iowa State in the Big 12 standings. And they would punch its ticket to the title game by beating BYU and Arizona next weekend. The implications for the Big 12 championship in this game is just going to have you on the edge of your seat all game long. But BYU and Colorado still have the simplest path to make it to the Big 12 championship. If both teams win their final 2 games, that would be the matchup. BYU and Colorado. Colorado would clinch a berth in the Big 12 title game with a win over Utah and losses by Arizona State and Iowa State. Arizona State, they would punch its ticket by winning its final 2 games unless Colorado and Iowa State won out and BYU dropped its final contest to Houston. But what is not talked enough about this BYU team is their defense. The Cougars have intercepted 17 passes this season. They're tied with Cal and James Madison for the most in the FBS. And 11 different defenders have contributed to that total. The Cougars' scoring defense is 19.5 points per game, which ranks 23rd in the FBS. That group will be tasked with slowing down Arizona State running back Cameron Scatterbo, who enters the weekend averaging 169.1 scrimmage yards. That is number 3 among all FBS players. But the fact remains, this is going to be one of the biggest home games in recent memory for Arizona State, and it will mark only the 2nd time in the last 10 years that Arizona State is a betting favorite against a ranked opponent. I expect Scatterbo to have a big game. Kansas, Colorado. Kansas has the opportunity to completely shake up the Big 12 standings for the 2nd week in a row with a win on Saturday. The Jayhawks will also be able to keep their bull hopes alive with a victory. They sit at 4-6. KU enters this matchup with 4 straight wins against the spread. Kansas has one of the most efficient offenses in the Big 12. As long as Daniels doesn't throw multiple interceptions. Shake your head with me. Made me dizzy a little bit. The Jayhawks average 30.2 points per game and have had plenty of success on the ground and through the air. KU's physical attack will present one of the toughest challenges Colorado's defense has faced all season. But just like BYU, Colorado controls its own postseason destiny and can lock up a spot in the Big 12 title game on Saturday with a win over Kansas. Now, it's no surprise that Colorado has arguably the top two players in the country in Heisman favorite Travis Hunter and quarterback Shedeur Sanders. Hunter enters Saturday as a heavy betting favorite in the latest Heisman odds, and he has season totals of 74 catches for 911 yards and 10 touchdowns and 23 tackles, 8 pass breakups, 3 interceptions, and 1 forced fumble. Yeah, there's a reason why he is the betting favorite for the Heisman right now. Sanders has 3,222 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and 4 rushing touchdowns. Now, Kansas thrives on grind it out type drives, but they struggle with explosive plays. That could possibly be the Jayhawks' downfall. They have to be able to exploit Colorado's one glaring defensive weakness, preventing big plays. On the other side of the ball, Colorado leans heavily on the dynamic duo of Sanders and Hunter, the two-way start. Yet, despite their star power, the Buffalo's offensive production has been solid. Rather, hasn't been spectacular. They've topped 400 total yards in just 2 of their last 5 games. Now, don't get me wrong, Kansas's defense is not elite, but corners Kobe Bryant and Mello Dotson, they bring a certain type of physicality to disrupt Colorado's screen-heavy attack, which could put pressure on Sanders to connect on intermediate and deep throws. This game is shaping up to be strength on strength between Kansas' efficient, ground-heavy offense and Colorado's front seven. With both teams having success against the spread this season, the outcome may hinge on which breaks first, Kansas' rushing offense or Colorado's ability to shut it down. This game I do have being a very, very close battle. I think it's going to come down to a possession or two, and depending on how clean of a game Jalen Daniels plays, I can see Kansas pulling an upset. But as I see it right now, I have Colorado. I am Ryan Van Deaver, and we are Hot Zone Sports. Thank you for tuning in today to The Burn and making us your first listen of the day. Hey, before you leave, give this video a thumbs up. Can you do that for me? It helps me pop in a real big way. Everything is free here. That's all I ask of you. Leave a comment below. And if you're on our podcast on Apple or Spotify, drop us that 5-star rating and a review. It really does help us out tremendously. So thank you guys for doing that. Also follow us on all social media. Platforms at Hot Zone Sports. And join the sports pages that is meant for you, because this is truly why we do this. For you, the people. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, click that notification button, and have a blessed weekend and enjoy the football. Peace out.